Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Namita and today's video is very close to my heart. This is something that I have never shared with anyone, something that I have never opened up about ever. So today I'm going to talk about my reading journey, which is directly linked with my own life story. If you have been watching me for quite some time, you would know that I am quite a private person. I don't talk about myself a lot, but today finally I decided to film it and share it publicly. Though I initially did not have the courage. I have been planning to film it from a very long time, but I couldn't really do it. But today I am going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about my life, how books have been my companions during different twists and turns, how books chose me, how I chose books at different stages of my life. So this is going to be a completely candid discussion, my honest, my very real life story. And this might be a little long video, so I would say grab yourself a cup of coffee or a green tea. And if you think that you're at all interested in knowing how I am so much into books, then you'll be able to understand the importance of reading after watching this video. And you will know that how different changes in our life affect us positively, even negatively. This is going to be a journey for you also. This video might be a little long and I would try to keep it an uncut version. So this is going to be absolutely real for you. So let's talk about my reading habit, how it began. So I was always reading. Right from childhood, I was reading. The only thing was that no one ever told me what to read and what not to read. I was reading based on what I like reading and what I really loved to read. So I developed this habit based on my choices. So that was the best thing. So it started with Champak, the children's magazine, which is very famous if you know about it. It's a Hindi, even in English version, but I started the Hindi one. I was always reading Champak, Tinkle, and then the comics, Chacha Chaudhary. We started reading Chacha Chaudhary. Pinky was my favorite comics. Chinni Chachi, Billu, there were a lot of them. I loved reading comics. So I and my brother would get 2 comic books and we will rent it. We would not buy those, we will rent it. We would rent it at a very less amount, 1 or 2 rupee per day. That was the rent. So we would just rent it, the 2 books. Both of us would finish ours and then exchange it, read it and give it back and got another one. So we would not keep it for very long, not more than 1 day. So this is the kind of reading we were doing. So that made me a fast reader. I would read a lot, but that was in Hindi. Apart from reading the textbook stories, which were there in Hindi and English textbooks, so I would always read them whenever we would get the new book set in new classes. So I was always reading. And then I think because of the reading, I could also speak well. I would always read aloud. Whenever I would read it aloud. So I had this ability to speak well. I was always participating in debates, declamations, different competitions in my school. So I was getting prizes, rewards, certificates for participating. I would always win first, second, third, any position. So mostly in prize, they would give children books. So I got a science book, more like an encyclopedia, many books. But during my class 7 or 8, I don't remember, I received this prize for I stood second in a declamation, I think, English declamation competition. So this is Barbara Cartland's The Ghost Who Fell in Love. I think this book planted the seed of reading novels into me, into my heart, and I started reading. But for that level, this was a bit advanced English. I could not really understand it back then when I got it as a prize. So I kept it and I read it when I was in class 11 or 12, and I read it many times after that. So this book had introduced me to the world of love stories, novels, and I thank this book that it got me into reading. And then we went to college, and then we had access to library. Even during my school, I would issue books like Cinderella, many story books I used to get issued from my library, read them, and I would paint different pictures from those books. So books have always been my best friends. So in college also I was reading different stories, mostly fiction. I was into fiction at that time. So I came across Mills and Boons, and I loved reading Mills and Boons. If you know about it, Mills and Boons are read by the name of Mills and Boons. I don't really remember the name of the novels. I think The Wild Horse or The White Horse, something. I still have one, The Stranger and Tessa Jones. This is something which was gifted to me much later. I've never completed it, but that time I read many of Mills and Boons. They were my favorites, a lot of them. So I would get the books issued from the library and read them, and I think I was always reading. There was never a time when I was not reading. I wanted to read something along with, of course, the syllabus books, but there had to be something, and I was reading love stories all the time. So fiction creates a world which is beautiful for you. It was more like, because I was reading love stories, I was reading Cinderella, I was reading all these kind of books. So I have lived many love stories, though I have never had one of my own, but I have lived love stories with different characters. So during my masters, I had to read, there were novels in my syllabus, so I had to force read some of them. All of them were not my favorite. Some of these you have to read for the sake of reading because you have to appear for examination. So many of them I read. Some of them I did not even read fully. I would just read the summary and prepare the answers. But some of them I read completely. If you don't know, I have done my masters in English literature. So there was English literature from different areas, like American literature in English, British literature in English, Indian literature in English, Italian literature in English. So you get to read a lot. So you cannot be fond of everything. Like, I don't like Shakespeare. There were a lot of other books I did not like. Yes, poetry I found interesting, some of them. John Donne, Wordsworth, Kamala Das, an Indian poetess. I loved her work. K.R. Narayan, R.K. Narayan, Indian writer, The Guide was written by him. So these were in my syllabus. But one book which has stayed with me since then is Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. This has been my favorite book. I read it completely. I don't have it with me. I think I got it issued from the library or I took it from a friend. I don't have it with me. So this is a wonderful book. I got to know about Oedipus complex, which was a new thing for me. I wanted to know more about it. So Sons and Lovers would always be my favorite read. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And apart from my syllabus books, I was still reading more novels. So there is this classic by Thomas Hardy, A Pair of Blue Eyes. It is not in a very good condition, and I think I had it in this condition only. So this is Wordsworth's classic, and you know, this is, I can't even express how these books change your life, how you keep swimming into the stories. You don't realize that it's not your story. So I was living and thriving into these books, into the stories. I was reading fiction all the time, and that became a part of my life. Now, I could not imagine my life without these love stories. Later, once I completed my masters and started my another masters in education, I was studying for a very long time. I read Twilight, the whole series, Twilight, Eclipse, New Moon, Breaking Dawn, all of that. It was another beautiful love story, the vampire story. I completely got lost into that world of vampires, and I lived that story as well. And then I read few Chetan Bhagat novels as well. My favorite would always be Two States. In fact, the movie did not justify my own perception of the book. Same with Twilight. The reading is different from watching a movie. My imagination was far better than what they portrayed in the movie. So I loved it. I read A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks, I guess. I read P.S. I Love You. Some Indian writers like Ravinder Singh also I read. But somehow the English novels were always more close to my heart. I really loved it. So there were many books that I read at that time. So I was living in my fantasy. It was always fiction that I was reading. It was always love, emotions, feelings, everything that I was living on. So my world was like that. Everything was good. I never felt the need to connect with someone. I was happy with my books. I was happy with the love stories, and that stayed for a very long time. That was with me. And I've even read books like Spouse. It was a nice book by Shobha De. So I think that was the only book which was a non-fiction. I got it issued from my library during M.Ed, if I am not wrong. Yeah. So yes, that was the only book. Otherwise, I was reading fiction all the time. Now, you cannot stay in your fantasy world forever. You have to come to reality. So there came a time when I collided with reality and my fantasy world got shattered. It was crushed into pieces. My dreamland fell flat on the floor, and I'm going to keep it very candid. I knew I would be a little emotional talking about it. So I was always reading these books, but reality is not like this. When you come out of your fantasy and you meet people and you realize that the world is harsh, it's not a fairy tale. You don't get like unconditional love, and people treat you in a very bad way. Your fantasy world just shatters there. So that happened. I could not deal with it because I was probably not ready for it. I was living in my own world, so I was not ready for it. I did not know how to deal with this harsh reality. So for a very long time, I felt lost. I was out of place. I did not know what to do. I could not handle the whole reality. I could not handle how things happened, and I had never imagined that things could turn like this. So that was the time when I was not reading. I was not being able to read, though I tried reading a lot of books, but somehow I couldn't simply read. I think that was the time when I got this Eric Siegel's love story. This was the time when I tried reading it. I have never been able to complete this book. I picked it up now also a few months back. I could not read it. So this book was never completed. So I was trying to read love stories, but I was not being able to do that. I was dealing with something very difficult. And then I thought, let me read something which is more positive, more inspiring. I could not focus and concentrate on that. I was trying my hands on different books, but I could not simply read. Life was too bitter with me. I don't know what my fault was, because I had, if you look at it from my perspective, I never harmed anyone. I was someone who was always lost in her books. I was a bookworm. I never really consciously did anything wrong with anyone, so I had no reason why I deserved this in my life. For me, it was going to be a perfect, beautiful fairy tale, but it did not happen with me. There can be a lot of reasons for that. So I was finding reasons, and one thing on the top of the other was happening. Everything was, it was everywhere. Nothing was in place in my life. Everything was scattered, and I did not know which piece to pick up and how to solve this whole riddle. I was feeling helpless. So then I was gifted this book by a friend after a few years, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, and then I got to know about law of attraction. And then I knew that, okay, so there are things which happen to you because maybe you have talked about them. I got to know about this law of universe, and I tried to connect the dots and understand a lot of things, but then again fell back, and again I was not being able to cope up with the harsh reality and the rejections, the discriminations, the pain, the suffering. I was not being able to do that. Then I got this book in our library, The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, and this book is about the psychology behind different feelings, behind love, behind discipline, behind a lot of things. So I got a few answers and I started understanding life a bit. But again, it was not that easy. It was again very harsh. Again, I would like read something, try to understand it, and then I would not know. So then I knew that I have to ultimately take help from something, and how much I could have faith in people was, I was not sure about it. So I just took help from the books, and I started reading. After suffering for many years, I switched on to self-help books, though I could never find my interest getting connected with those books. I told you that I come from that fiction genre and I love it. I still believe that fiction is my favorite thing. I still believe in fantasy. I still believe in love. Like, my faith has not shattered. Yeah, my world, my life shattered, but the faith is still intact. So I was trying to read self-help books, but I was not being able to do that until I came across a book which was more of a solution to a lot of my questions. It had answers. I would not name each and every book because some of them are more specific. I would not like to share each and every book, but yeah, I remember I was going through a very rough patch. I did not know why I was doing what I was doing at that point of time, and I used to carry this book along, Jack Canfield, How to Get From Where You Are to Where You Want to Be. And this book is a gem. It helped me a lot. I think this book brought me to read more of it, and this is a beautiful piece. Everybody should read it. This will solve a lot of your problems. This book brought me closer to reading more. Now, there is this one book, Norman Vincent Peale's Treasury of Joy and Enthusiasm, and this book is something which I kept all the time with me when I would go to institutes. I always had this book. I would give this to my students also to read excerpts from this book only. So this was with me. I have never read it fully, but I've read chapters and pieces and parts of it whenever I wanted to read. So this was a book which was in my bag all the time. I carried it for a very long time with me. And then I started reading self-help. That was the time when I completely lost track with my fiction, my fantasy world. That was the time when I switched to self-help because there was no other way. If I had to bring my life back into track, there was no other way. So I had to read it. Then I read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, another favorite read. Then I read Robin Sharma's The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. This is again very close to my heart. It told me about the value of this life. Sometimes you start hating your life. There is a sort of resentment because of the incidents, because of the suffering, because of whatever happened to you, the bitter experiences. But this told me that it cannot be an end to your life. You can pick your pieces back. You can bring your physical and mental health back. And then I started learning more about mental health. That was a time when I thought that I should know more about mental health. I was disturbed mentally, emotionally, and of course I was getting affected physically very badly. I had some physical challenges which I faced. So it was a very let's not talk about it. Then I read about Eat, Pray, Love. I read this book, Eat, Pray, Love. I even watched the movie and I like the movie also, but the read was amazing. It was beautiful. I loved reading this book. It's a very fat book, but I loved reading it. It introduced me to a bit of spirituality as well, and about how life needs to be lived. I think I lost the whole track of my life. I forgot how to live. I forgot how to be happy. It was like, my transparency was lost. What I thought would happen didn't happen. Or maybe it's important sometimes to experience life in reality, which I was experiencing through books. But I would not blame myself for that because I was enjoying it. I loved it. Dealing with real people is hard. It can be very difficult. Okay, then I read this book. I've shared it with you many times, Who Will Cry When You Die? Another nice, very nice book. Then The Be Happy Attitudes. This is a book by Robert H. Sculler. It's a very nice book and it helped me a lot to come out of my miseries. It helped me a lot. I've marked so many things in this book. This book helped me a lot in coming back on track. I've marked a lot of beautiful lines in this. This will be again a very helpful book for me. This will be in that stack. And what finally led me to read more of self-help books and work on myself, work on my physical, mental, emotional health, my happiness, invest in myself, being conscious about life, is this book. This is a life-changing book by Sadhguru, Inner Engineering. I ordered it from Amazon, I guess. I wanted to read it. I started listening to Sadhguru and something was drawing me to him, more of him. Then I got to know about the book and I thought of ordering it. I fell in love with this book. I had a long love affair with this book for a very long time. I would keep it close to me all the time. I can't tell you how this book has touched my heart. There are a lot of markings on this book. It's a must read for everybody. And there is this one book I kept reading off and on, this It Only Takes a Minute to Change Your Life by Willie Jolly. I still read it. It has nice stories and how small things can help you. This is how self-help books work for you. They help you with your everyday inspiration, your motivation. That's what they do. So I completely left reading love stories. So in between I ordered this one for myself. I read it, The Love That Feels Right, and it was a soothing read by Ravinder Singh. I have cried with it, with the character. So this was a good read too. In between I even read The Secret Wish List by Preeti Shenoy, I think it was. Yes, it was by Preeti Shenoy. And there was one more book, This Love That Feels Right, if I'm not wrong. There was like, This Love That Feels Right, something like that was the name. So I have read quite a few fiction too, because I cannot leave reading these books. This is my heart and soul. Fiction, love stories is still, it is very, very, very close to my heart. So the one you cannot have, Secret Wish List, and this Ravinder Singh's book. So I was reading some of them, but yes, I did not derive the same pleasure that I used to derive back then. So just to get in touch with my real side, I was reading it. And then there is this one more book, Elif Shafak Hai, I think this is how you pronounce this name, The 40 Rules of Love. I'll put the picture here. This is beautiful book. It is about Rumi and Shams of Tabriz. This is, I would not say it's a self-help book. It's more like a spiritual book. It's a nice book. It changed a lot with me. It's a very recent read. I don't have it with me, so I'll just share it over here. You can consider buying this book. So this has been my transition from fiction, fantasy, love stories to self-help books. And now, still, when I'm on my healing journey, still there are some whys and some what ifs, some whether I deserved something better or not, and why things happened. So there are still some answers left. So I switched to more of spiritual books. I just finished reading The Search That Seeks You. You want to know more about life, when you've suffered a lot, see, everybody has a lot of challenges and struggles, but sometimes life can throw a lot of difficult situations on you. And then I got to know that there is a past karma which makes you suffer in this life, and if you bear it with more strength, then you would not accumulate a lot more for your next life. And yes, this is now helping me pick my pieces up. The way I just fell badly, I'm picking myself up and getting back to my originality. So these are the books which I am now delving into. More of spiritual books. The Power of Now, it is another one. Okay, Think Like Monk by Jay Shetty. I think I forgot to bring it. I have that book also. I'm reading that also now. So right now I'm reading spiritual books. So this is how the transition happened. This is how books chose me, or this is how I chose different books at different stages of my life. I know it might have been a little emotional for you, but it is very emotional for me also. This is something which I have never talked about. I think people close to me don't even know how I changed. People mocked me for my choice of books. They said that this is all rubbish that you read with fiction and with love stories. But I still believe that love stories can take you to another world. I would still say that fiction is my favorite. I still love stories more than anything, but this time of my life is all about learning and growing and thriving. So I am more into self-help and spiritual books now. This is the need of the hour. This is not something which is in my control. I cannot relate more to love stories anymore. I told you I picked this book again but couldn't complete it. So yeah, this is what destiny has chosen for me. There has been a lot which happened, and books were always there. They were always there. Yes, there was some patch when I was not reading. I could not read. I could not do anything. I was not reading. I think I was not even breathing most of the times. It was so suffocating. So coming out of it happened only because of these books. If books would not have been there, I would have probably, I don't know. So it is the books which kept me alive, and it can do wonders for anyone. Sharing this is important so that you can realize how books are going to keep you grounded. You listen to videos, you listen to podcasts. I know you are consuming content in different forms, but reading works on different aspects. It's more about gaining knowledge, learning, keeping yourself active, because when you're reading you have to be active. You cannot be doing something passively. So it makes you mindful, it keeps you conscious about all the activities. So I hope after watching this video you will start reading. Read what you want to read. I have always read what was important for me at that point of time to read. So this is all my journey, this is my life story, and this is what I wanted to tell you. And I am still reading, I am still growing, I'm working on getting better every day. I'm working on my mental health. I'm reading a lot of psychology behind mental health, patterns and whatnot, because I want to, because I'm interested in it. So read something that you're interested in, read something which you can relate to more based on your stage of life. That was all I wanted to share through this video. So let's end it here. Take care of yourself. Bye bye for now.